Good morning. My name is Austin Praden. I am the owner of Droptine Studios and Picture Perfect Whitetails. My wife and I bought into whitetail 2 years ago, and we're already talking about selling out. Let's talk about it. So this morning, we were supposed to do a podcast about Picture Perfect Whitetails and a little bit of our story of why we're in it. And as you can tell, I'm by myself. So we graciously are joined by our podcast man, Daniel. He's back there with himself where he normally is. But yeah, today it's going to be me and him. Even though he's back there, we're going to be doing a podcast together. What's going on, Daniel?
Oh, not much. So you got in 2 years ago, so let's just start from the beginning, I guess. And what made you get into whitetails?
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved whitetail. Big whitetail out in the pasture has always been my favorite thing. It's been my favorite thing to watch. It's been my favorite thing to photograph and film through over the years. And that's kind of what started it. When my dad and I had our ranch, we met a lot of great people, but we also met a lot of not so great people. So we were always more into the exotics, and our families were into the exotics. But when we got into the whitetail, we kind of got bent over by a couple people, and, good, bad, or indifferent, it's what happened. And that kind of just lit a fire under me that, hey, if growing big, typical, pretty whitetail out in the pasture is one of my favorite things to do, I thought my wife and I would be able to do that and to do it honest, to be able to help people and to truly show them, especially from the media side, show them step by step, show them repetition of what myself, my clients, or anybody was able to grow out in the pasture, not just in pens. Because it is a little easier to grow them in pens with the right genetics, but being able to have survivability behind that is what's a little harder. And that's really what was the passion behind that. But the financial reason was we saw the writing on the wall. No one quote me on this. I don't know the exact statistics, but from what I've heard is 3 years ago, there was, 2,000 whitetail breeders in Texas, and now there's not even 600 of them. And so we saw the writing on the wall. There's a supply and demand issue beforehand, but now that there's only 600-ish whitetail breeders in Texas, we saw that there was going to be a demand for whitetail for not only the bucks, for, supplying stalkers to shoot, or if it's for, pasture release does so guys can grow their own whitetail out in the pasture. But yeah, we saw the writing on the wall. It was going to be my wife and I's retirement plan. And we also didn't anticipate for Droptine to grow 3,000%. And that's kind of one of the reasons why we're talking about selling some stuff. But yeah, that was, the passion behind the whitetail for me, and being able to have a retirement plan for Kylie and I.
So you mentioned that like over 50% of the whitetail breeders have gotten out in the past few years.
Yeah.
What do you think the reason behind that is?
I mean, let me start this. I'm nobody. I just have my own opinions, and from what I've talked with other people, so no one quote me. I am not a biologist. I am nothing besides a young guy trying to make a living for my wife and I. I think the biggest reason, Daniel, is government overreach. Texas Parks and Wildlife is putting in a lot of rules and regulations, and rightfully so. I mean, I'm not saying the science isn't there. That's not what I'm saying at all, but it has just become so much overreach that a lot of the small mom and pops or someone like myself, we can't keep up with it. I do think that, just because of the way the world is, prices have gotten so high. But now that there's so many different tests and regulations and everything else on top of, all the additions to what it normally would be to raise livestock or animals, it's just getting so expensive. And having that, along with the government being your partner that doesn't want you to be successful, it's hard to sustain a successful business and a profitable business. I'm not doing this for fun. I'm doing this for our retirement. And if I have someone who's constantly trying to shut me down or trying to do that, I'm so small potatoes in this game that I can't sustain trying to keep up with the Joneses or trying to keep up with them. And so ultimately, it's gotten most people to that point of where they're not able to do it, but even being able to sell breeder to breeder has gotten so hard. Ultimately, if no one can put the pieces together, it's mainly from the restrictions and causation of CWD or chronic wasting disease, but they have made so many rules on that. Like no breeder really wants to move whitetail from one pen to another and be tied to them for 5 years. So if anyone that they've ever been touched by or sold to or brought in from, all those people have different spider webs and they're being connected to one another. And if someone gets shut down that you've never even had association with, and it somehow gets connected back to you, you and your facility could be shut down or potentially terminated because of someone sold to 5 years ago. And that's just been too risky, especially for me.
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned that this was your retirement plan. And so over the past 2 years, as you've gone through this and seen how all this has happened, would you say that this was a smart financial move, or you kind of regretted it all, or what's your thought on that?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say I regret it. I don't live in a life of regret with anything. I think that there are definitely moves I would have done differently, but Kylie and I knew going in it was a high risk, but at the same time, anything you do, it's high risk, high reward. So we decided to kind of go into it with that mindset and with that risk in mind. So no, I don't regret anything. I don't regret getting into there because the doors this has opened for me from a business standpoint, the doors that getting into the whitetails opened for me from introducing myself to new people who have used us for media. That's been a whirlwind. That almost paid for the entire purchase itself. And so being able to do those things makes it all worthwhile. Now, we wouldn't have bought into this if we knew 2 years later we would be potentially getting rid of all of our live animals. That just, isn't a smart decision anyway.
Yep.
But more so than the expenses, more so than any other reasons I mentioned earlier, is the growth of Droptine. We were trying to grow. You've been around for about 4 years, and I've never had that mindset of kind of staying the same or staying where I'm at or staying comfortable. I've always wanted to go the next level. I've always wanted to push the company, but we're really right now trying to keep up with everything. Like I said earlier, we've grown like 3,000% in the past couple of years, and that takes a lot of time. That takes a lot of money and a lot of my focus to be able to put into that situation, because we don't want to lose clients. We don't want clients to feel like they've been swept under the rug, and being able to teach the team and hire new people and do all those things as a small company is very time consuming, as well as trying to be a whitetail breeder is very time consuming. And so I'm not even boots on the ground. We've got Jay Smith who watches over the deer and takes care of them and does all those things. And, God bless him, because he's helped us out a ton. But that is something where we're not even doing that aspect. So just the aspect of selling semen, going to shows, doing advertisements, having that face-to-face interactions with people to be a good business person is time consuming. And I think if Droptine wouldn't have grown 3,000%, over the past couple of years, we would have been able to stay longer or do more things, because we would have more time. But since, like I said, my time and focus has to be on employees, clients, and the company, that's where the whitetail's starting to hinder. And so, as the great wise Ron Swanson said, don't half-ass two things, whole-ass one thing. And so that's kind of been our mentality behind that is, no, I don't regret it. It's still is a smart financial decision, and we're still selling semen and we're still selling whitetail to ranches. So none of that has changed. But overall, there are a couple things that I would have changed in there a little bit.
So you mentioned you still have semen and stuff, but you are getting out. So what's your reason for still having the semen? Are you selling it? Are you giving it to other ranches? What's your goal with that?
Yeah, so the ultimate goal of buying into whitetail is still the same. We want people to be able to grow. Everyone says big, pretty typicals out in the pasture, but like at the end of the day, that's a different definition to everybody. We see some, like, I guess in the industry, we say like there's breeder typicals and then there's ranch typicals, because breeder typicals are, say, like 20 to 30% deduction and they're still a typical deer. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's my specific business model. Now, ranches say, like, some ranches say less than 10%, some ranches say less than 5%. Non-typical deductions would be classified as typical. But for me, that's still the passion behind this. And so, we've got over 15 to 1,800 straws of semen in the tank, and we still go to shows. We still put money back into the organizations that help support the media side, that fight for our rights, that fight for the landowners, that fight for the deer breeders, and we want to help support them. So we do donations and we do things like that, and we buy booths and advertisements. But the main focus of the business is still to help people grow truly typical deer out in the pasture that have survivability. It's really easy to do it once. A blind squirrel finds a nut all the time. But our main goal is to help people grow big typicals out in the pasture, whether that is helping people, even if it's not our deer, if we don't have deer in pens. We've done this for years before we bought whitetail, but we help clients buy deer. So like, let's say we had a client that says, hey, I need 20 bred does. We go to 100 ranches a year. We know plenty of people that have whitetail with genetics that we trust, and they're not just whitetails they're trying to offload or old does or anything like that. So we can go to that ranch, say, these are the 20 we would buy. You can either choose our semen, or they can be live covered by these deer, or whatever it would be. And then we facilitate that sale for them. And so, again, the passion, the reasoning is still to help people grow big deer out in the pasture, whether it's with our deer or with our clients' deer. But it's really giving people the assurance that they know what they're buying, rather than what someone is trying or willing or really just trying to offload out of their pens when they get overloaded.
So you mentioned your main goal is just kind of helping out ranches and getting them to be able to have big typicals on the ranches and in the pastures. But if you could go back to the day you bought the deer, would you have done anything different?
Yeah. I wish I would have bought them earlier, which I know might sound crazy to most people listening, but I wish I would have bought them different, because back then, looking at the books and looking at semen sales, semen sales are still going great. A lot of people are moving towards the GEBVs, whether it's the letters, the numbers, whatever it may be. Money Shot and Hypnotic, our two biggest breeders currently, are GS. We call Hypnotic our neutral buck because he's GS 0.00, and Hypnotic is a positive number. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's either 0.02 or somewhere around there, but he is positive. But before these numbers and before GEBVs came out, semen sales were crazy. Randy did a really good job of promoting the deer throughout the nation rather than just in the state he was in. And I think that really helped. It helped out the mom and pops. It helped out the other states. He donated a lot to different organizations. I still get stuff in the mail or in emails that's like, hey, Randy bought this. He told us to pass it on to you. And whether it's front covers, inside covers, whatever, but Randy was really good about spreading himself out, spreading out his deer and marketing them. And Randy was a nobody in Texas, more or less. I think that's because of politics, but that's a different time for a different story. But he was really good at selling semen. And I think it's just because he was honest. And I think that is what I would have changed. I would have bought in earlier so I could have had more profit from semen sales. But hell, even yesterday we were sitting in here trying to talk about what we were going to do, and we had 3 phone calls from people who were trying to buy semen. And so, semen sales are still great. We've got a ton of straws in here. We just got back from the depot. We just did all those things. And so business is still good. It's still profitable. It's just the aspect of where we have to put our time and money and efforts into, which has to be Droptine, because Droptine's more profitable and it's more sustainable long term. Unfortunately, we don't know the state, literally what the state is going to do or anything. But overall, I think if I could just do anything different, it would be buying them earlier so I could have more semen sales, but that's about it.
So do you think that after a certain amount of time of being out of Picture Perfect and stuff, will you come back into it once you've maybe settled down with Droptine and been able to get a little more free time?
Yeah, I think so. I think that overall, like my goal, like my personal goal long term is still to own a ranch with my wife and my kids and high fence it and be able to put genetics out there. And I still will keep, I'm not trying to offload and get rid of all my semen. Like, so I would love to have, I might even go buy, money shot or hypnotic does from somebody one day and breed them to something else, or buy some genetics that I like and trust and breed them back to money shot straws or hypnotic straws or shutter speed or silent shutter. We kind of got a few in there that to choose from, but something that really would be my personal goal is to have that and to clear house inside of there. So when 5-6 years later after we start, I can really say like, hey, these are truly still my genetics that are running around this pasture. A great one, we've got 2 or 3 clients that we can go back that have only bought from us and only are deer from our pens or only bucks from us or does from us. And it's really cool to go out there and see the deer that they have produced. It's really cool to see all of the, how many does are out there, how many fawns out there, and just to see, life come to that. But more importantly, I don't know if I'd say more importantly, but more visually appealing is seeing the bucks grow. It's really cool to see pasture-born bucks that are our genetics running out there and how big they are and all that. But I would say that's the personal goal. And then long term, I'll probably get back into whitetail. I just have to wait and see what the state is going to do. I really want to see, I want them to level out and like have set in stone rules instead of the rules changing back and forth what feels like every week. And so I would love to be able to get back into it, but it would be, like you said, it would have to be when Droptine is settled and when I could truly be out of it and the company runs itself so I can devote more of my time there.
So you've mentioned that, whitetail's always been your passion and stuff, and that it's gotten hard with the government overreach and stuff. Do you think you'd ever get into exotics, especially since they have a little bit less government interaction and stuff?
Yeah, I get asked this like weekly. We've been approached to partner on fallow. We've been approached to partner on other things, but I think overall the overarching theme inside of this is currently I don't have time, and I have to learn from my mistakes. So, and I don't know if I'd call it a mistake, but I have to learn from my lessons. And so I have to learn that as much as I want to jump on the bandwagon or bind a fallow or axis or sable or kudu, it would be fun, but to me, the passion isn't there like whitetail is, mainly because we didn't breed them as long. I will say throughout, like if you look at whitetail 10, 15 years ago, whitetail prices skyrocketed. And they came up and they kind of came to a heavy peak. And then they kind of dropped out. And then they came back up and had a sustainable growth. And right now they're going through the roof again. I mean, 3 years ago, the average, 3-4 years ago, the average stalker buck price was about $5,500. The next year was about $6,000, $6,500, and that was kind of what we were basing our business model off of. And hell, last year the average price was like $8,000. And so again, it's a supply and demand issue. So the finances is there, and I say that to compare it to exotic. So like if I strictly was going to do a business decision, I would get into exotics, but I have to put my time and money into Droptine because I don't know if exotics are going to have a sustainable 3,000% growth like Droptine has. We're not trying to have that every year. I would rather have a slow, sustainable growth than a spike and a drop, but we are putting everything into Droptine. So currently the answer is no. I don't think I would get into exotics, but you never know. I'm always willing and open, but we have been approached to do partnerships and different promotional things, but we currently do not own any exotics besides our axis on the low fence that we have in Brady. Thank you to everyone who tuned in to the podcast today. I hope you enjoyed hearing the story about my wife and I getting into whitetail and if we're going to potentially sell out. But I do want to make a small disclaimer. I mentioned stuff about Texas parks. I mentioned things about government overreach, but I strictly want to say that these are just my personal opinions. They have nothing to do, and we hope that you do not do any business decisions based off of what we say. Again, I'm a nobody that knows somebody just trying to help out everybody. So I am only here to share my opinions and my personal story, and they are just opinions and nothing factual. So thank you guys, and tune into the next episode. Thanks.